Welcome to video 24, fractions. What does it mean?
Okay, a lot of people find fractions quite scary and there really is no need for it. Fractions is really simple and makes so much sense. So we're going to do that by drawing it out today. What do fractions mean? Before we even go on to what fractions mean, we need to know about some of the vocab. So a fraction will have a line like that, okay? And the top of the fraction is called the numerator. The bottom of the fraction is called the denominator. I'm just going to write that up here for us. Numerator and denominator. Okay, the numerator tells us how many pieces we're looking at. So I'm going to draw a little eye here to remind us. And the bottom of the fraction, the denominator, tells us how many pieces make a whole. Okay. Now, when we're saying a fraction, we say the numerator like a normal number, but the denominator, we say it like a erase position. I'll show you what I mean by that. So, put my line in there. My numerator is 1, so I'm going to say 1. My denominator is a 5. But if we were saying that in a race position, if we were in a race and we came number 5 overall, we'd say 5th. So I'm going to say 1/5. Let's have another look. Here we've got 2/7. The only time this doesn't work is when our denominator is a 2 or when our denominator is a 4. And then we say half or quarters. Okay, so now we know how to say fractions and we know the vocabulary for fractions. I've written a sum up here. So I've got 1/5, 2/7, bless you,
Thank you.
and 9/10. So what do fractions actually mean? A fraction is smaller than one whole. So sometimes I say to the children, my head is a fraction of my body. It's part of my whole body. Because it's part of one whole. However, that's not technically true because a fraction is an equal part of a whole and my head is definitely not in proportion with the rest of my body. So I'm going to draw this out so it makes a little bit more sense to you. Here is 1/5 and I'm going to draw one whole rectangle. Now you might see in books, on the internet, or people drawing fractions out for you, that people draw fractions as a circle. Mainly because things like cutting up pizzas, cutting up cakes, I can understand why they do that. At school, I tell children that we're going to draw out fractions as a rectangle, and there is a reason for that. I cannot equally cut up a circle, and I can equally cut up a rectangle, so I can always add bits more on. So here, I've got one whole rectangle, and my denominator tells us how many pieces make a whole. So I need to cut my rectangle up into 5 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that bit there isn't equal to the rest of this. So I'm going to make my rectangle a little bit smaller. So now I've got 5 equal pieces. That's why I don't like doing my circles. I can't rub that out. My numerator tells me how many pieces we're going to be looking at. So they're how many I'm going to colour in today. So I've got 5 pieces that make one whole rectangle, and I'm going to be looking at one little piece of that rectangle. So there as a picture is 1/5. The next one, 2/7. Again, I'm going to draw my rectangle. That's one whole rectangle. By the way, I'm not comparing this rectangle to this rectangle, the different sizes, okay? I'm just drawing out what 2/7 might be. I've got one whole rectangle and I'm going to cut it up into 7 pieces. That's my denominator. How many pieces make a whole? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. See, this is why I can't do circles. And I'm going to be looking at 2 of those pieces because that's my numerator. And those pieces don't have to stick together. Sometimes they can. It's easier to compare fractions when they are. But I'm going to go a bit freestyle. And we're just going to have a look at 2 of those. Almost looks a bit like a B. Okay, last fraction. I've got 9/10. So I'm going to draw out my whole rectangle again. And I'm going to cut it up into 10 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, look, that piece there isn't equal. To be fair, that piece there doesn't look that equal either. Let's go here. That looks better. And I'm looking at 9 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pieces. So that will represent 9/10. You can see I've got one whole rectangle. I'm looking at 9 pieces and we cut that whole into 10 pieces. Have a go at drawing out one of these fractions. We have 1/6 or 3/5. Pause the tape, the video, and we'll go through the answers together. So 1/6, I've got my one whole rectangle and I'm going to cut it up into 6 pieces, 6 equal pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hopefully you did yours on a whiteboard. 6. And we're looking at just one of those pieces. Remember, you could have coloured in any of these just as long as you just coloured in one of them. And this one here, 3/5. So I've got my one whole rectangle and I'm going to cut that into 5 pieces. 2, 3, 4. Again, overdid it. Looking at 3 of those pieces, I'm going to fill in the first 3, but yours would be correct, whichever 3 you decided to colour up. Just to remind you that a 10th is also a fraction. Remember we said it was smaller than one whole unit, and that's what a decimal point was for. And remember we said that a 10th was one whole unit that was cut up into 10 pieces. So if we were to colour one of those in, we'd have 1/10. That's written just the same as our fractions. So just wanted you to bear in mind and remember that our place value understanding is also linked in with fractions. So let's put fractions onto our ever-growing number mind map. It looks very complicated, but if you've gone through all the videos with us, then this will make complete sense to you. So we're going to go up here, past place value, up here to fractions. Remember, we said the top of the fraction is the numerator, the bottom is the denominator. The numerator is how many we're looking at, and the denominator is how many pieces make a whole. We talked about saying the fraction, that the denominator is like a race position. Apart from when we've got the denominator of 2 or the denominator of 4, because we call that a half, and we call this a quarter, or quarters. We looked at drawing fractions out to see what they meant. So we had 1/5, which was the same as one whole rectangle. Remember, we don't want circles. We can't cut those up equally. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we needed to split that whole into equal pieces. And the numerator was how many we were looking at. We linked that understanding through all the way down here to our tenths and our hundredths and our thousandths and our tens of thousandths. Because remember, we said that a tenth was one whole unit cut into 10 pieces, so that's exactly the same as our fraction. That would be one whole cut into so many pieces.